tweeted President Obama demanding that the White House take quicker action to end one of Wall Street's giants it's aimed at. A Democratic aide now says the Senate probably won't take up a bill to overhaul financial regulation until next week instead of this Thursday, as it has been originally reported. Also today, Wall Street's most further is another example of how the White House or the people in the Beltway are in some way tied to Wall Street, the people they're fighting.
I mean, yes. I don't know, but I understands that. I think that the biggest issue right now, to reveal to the American people all of the email traffic between AIG and Goldman Sachs so that we can actually see how much of what happened to our country as a result of it.
Explain a lot of this. It's difficult for even insiders, but now you've got Goldman Sachs, and they've made an incredible first quarter profit, 90% surge. How does that affect the investigation, and does that somehow help divert or distract the conversation?
I mean, remember, in the bailout,
taking on financial regulatory reform, many people thought that this would be a slam dunk, and that who was going to go and say, I'm supporting and defending Wall Street, and sure enough, some people are doing that.
They both are.
They both are. But they say that money comes from the banks. It won't come from the American people.
Fair enough, but a too-big-to-fail bank, before it blows up, is in the process of extracting money for 10 years before it blows up. And so whether the bailout comes from the executive, if I have a special advantage relative to every other anchor at MSNBC, because I'm to Contessa's salary, I collect Keith Olbermann's salary, now I'm making big dollars, but I don't have to show up because I have a special relationship with the government at MSNBC, being Phil Griffin. These banks are looking to create a special relationship that only they have with the U.S. government by preserving their too-big-to-fail status, and then all the firms that were concocting the sorts of schemes that Goldman Sachs is accused of concocting, all of those firms need to be investigated before we proceed too much further down this line. The American people are being stolen from, and lending and investment is not happening in this.
Coming up at 4 p.m. Eastern time here on MSNBC. Thanks to thousands of passengers in Europe, some flights are taking off. Bob Bazell, he's actually at the scene of the volcano in Iceland. Another big story, Apple's secret iPhone revealed and returned. A new CEO. What do you make of this story? Some people say it's a gimmick by Apple.
It's definitely not a gimmick. I mean, I've been writing about Apple and its products for years. I've never seen anything.
iPhone that no one's seen.
Yeah.
And he doesn't return it to Apple. He takes it to a
Well, they say that he tried to return it to Apple, and they wouldn't return his calls. But it has two cameras, one in the front, one in the back, which is great for sort of holding up the phone and doing face-to-face video calls. And that would be a really cool application. Seems to have a ceramic
phone back.
Well, they were radio silent for a while because in order to get the phone back, they'd have to acknowledge it was really not fired. He is probably in an eye dungeon somewhere.
Chicago Sun-Times reporter Lynn Sweet and a group of military leaders, well, they're calling school lunches a threat to our national security. What's behind that? It's coming up. Welcome back. White House Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel is no longer trying to quash persistent rumors that he wants to run for mayor of Chicago someday. Instead, reform today in response to a new law in Arizona that allows authorities to pull over Hispanics and ask them to produce residency documents. At least one lawmaker, Democratic Congressman Luis Gutierrez of Illinois, says he may urge Latinos to stay home during the midterm elections if reform is not passed. NBC back to Iceland now, where that volcano is still causing a lot of problems. It is spewing an ash plume 8,000 feet. If you're not aware, this is National Weed Day. Weed as in marijuana. It is also known as Stoner's Day or 420. Just write all that down. But whatever you choose to call it, it is a big day for people who smoke marijuana around the world, and it's taking on a special significance this year, with California voters set to decide in November whether to become the first state to legalize pot. There's also a growing push to legalize marijuana in other places. So what is the real significance of April 20th? We're joined now by Ryan Grimm, senior congressional correspondent for the Huffington Post. He's also the author of This Is Your Country on Drugs, The Secret History of Getting High in America. Ryan, you are so diverse. It is incredible. It's amazing. But let me ask you, I didn't know it was National Weed Day. I hate to admit it because I'm going to get beat up on Twitter because everyone else seems to know that it was National Weed Day. But there's a new poll out there that says still, I believe it's 55% of Americans don't think it's a good idea to legalize marijuana.
Yeah, Tamron, I can't believe you let that out of the bag. You know, It's been 420. You know, for the last decade and a half, it's been a day that people have started to really celebrate. And I have a story up on Huffington Post today that we're actually reprinting from a year ago that tries to explain the origins of it. Now, it's impossible to know exactly how it started because there could always be some stoner who says, "Hey, man, I used the term before these guys." But we did track it down to this group of high school students in San Rafael, California in 1971. I interviewed a whole bunch of them, and their story matches up. They have evidence that backs up their claim, and it's this, that a buddy of theirs had to abandon a patch of excellent bud somewhere in the Point Reyes forest. So
this is like a Cheech and Chong conversation.
Exactly.
I mean, excellent bud, I guess, and I'll translate. That means really good marijuana?
Or kind, or whatever the Californians like to call it.
Okay.
So they were going to go tramp through these woods looking for this, and so they said, well, we'll meet after school at the Louis Pasteur statue at 420. And so then when they would see each other in the hallway, they'd say, "Hey, 420 Louis, dude," and that was code for, we're going to go get high and we're going to go look for this pot. And so eventually they dropped the Louis and they just kept using 420. The way that it kind of drifted, so to speak, into the rest of the culture is that after the counterculture kind of collapsed in San Francisco in the late 60s, everybody moved up to Marin County. And so you had the Grateful Dead living right where these 5 high school kids were. One of their fathers was doing real estate for the Dead. One of their brothers was managing like a side band for them. So they were always hanging out and smoking pot around the Dead. I actually interviewed the Dead about this, and they said, "Yeah, I remember those guys."
Wow.
I don't remember exactly when we started using 420. Shock there. But it spread over the next 30, 40 years, and here we are today that all across the country, people are going to meet at around 420. They're going to spark up, and then they're going to go home.
And is it appropriate to say to someone, if I saw someone on the street today, "Happy 420 day"? Is that appropriate? Does that say something about me if I greet someone that way?
It would be a code. So happy 420, Tamron.
Okay, but let me ask you, what are the chances that we will see the legalization of marijuana in California?
It's the toughest time for them to run this because in the midterms you have mostly older voters coming out, and older voters are overwhelmingly opposed to marijuana legalization. And at the same time, you're going to have the prison guards union spending millions of dollars to try to beat this back. And if you can think of a more cynical political position to take, then there should be more people in prison so that we can work overtime to guard them, then I'd like to know what it is. But in 2008, the prison guards were able to beat a treatment over incarceration initiative by spending millions of dollars on it. So the potheads out there are going to be outmatched. But California is in such dire fiscal straits that maybe people will say, look, we've spent enough on this folly. It's time to move forward.
Well, that's what many people say. And in fact, that poll I was mentioning, 65% say legalizing pot would, in their thoughts, have no effect or reduce crime. And as I pointed out, 55% still say in this poll that they're not for the legalization. Interesting conversation, Ryan. I greatly appreciate it. And I'm going to read that book so I can get up to date on what's happening. Thank you very much. I will. And a former University of Tennessee college student, award-winning actor Michael Douglas appears before a federal judge. In fact, it's happening right now.
Really made a huge difference. Number one, he's sober. Number two, he takes responsibility for everything that he's done. But as a parent, you can understand where he'd be asking for leniency. A lot of people...
Yeah, that would make it relatable to people, though. I mean, this franchise has always been around.
A lot of people say that's true inside baseball. It's just, you know, the holiday show featuring his songs in Vegas. They haven't announced to be an MGM Mirage property. Most likely, the money that's earned from this show gets split 50-50 between the production and the estate. So,
a Massachusetts high school student involved in the Phoebe Prince bullying case was in court today. On another issue, 18-year-old Austin police want to talk to a man who's been pictured with a mother who disappeared Saturday after she went shopping. And thank you, Katie.
Anytime, thank you.
And a billboard promoting breastfeeding has some. Welcome back. Crossing the line, you tell me. How does this breastfeed? They're trying to get more women to do it, so you tell me. Good message with a clever ad or a distasteful way to get an important... Here are some things we thought you should know. Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens is... You can picture it since we don't have the video of him driving it. Those are some things we thought you should know, and that does it for this hour. Thank you so very much for joining us. Interesting topics across the board. And you can join me tomorrow, each weekday, 11 a.m., 2 p.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, Donnie Deutsch is up next. Donnie.
Tamron, we're doing a week-long series, America the Angry. You think we're a little dangerous in the angry zone here? We need to kind of get our arms around this thing?
I think some people are extremely...
I think people are fed up with it, and I'm going to work on this entire week. Today's show, the media, co-conspiracy.